Good afternoon and welcome to Talking Politics at UOW. Today's guest, Nationals candidate from Throsby, Alan Hay. Mr. Hay, I'd first of all like to begin by briefly asking you your thoughts on the current minority government, having previously told me you don't like factions, which is a sad ingredient of Australian politics.
Oh, good afternoon, Josh. The existing parliament, in my opinion, will be short-lived. Mm-hmm. The idealistic attitudes towards a love-in session in Australian politics is just not being realistic. Mm-hmm. Factional infighting, etc., in parties is something I deplore, which is why I'm with the Nationals Party. But it's not going to be resolved by a hung parliament.
Okay. You've previously accused the former Rudd Labor government of waste and mismanagement, claiming the huge debt racked up by them has hindered Australia from moving forward and investing in the future of Australia. Do you now see this minority government as hindering Australia from moving forward?
Well, look, the realistic scenario is the fact that no comprehensive policies are going to be able to pass through both lower and upper house. So what you're going to have is many policies will be put out on the table, but the actual result will be a stalemate. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just moving on to more local politics, Mr. Hay, you accused Labor factional bosses of undemocratically electing Stephen Jones to candidacy before the federal election, arguing he, like New South Wales Premier Christina Keneally, is a puppet to them. Do you now eat humble pie following the people's choice to re-elect him and, in turn, Labor to power?
Not at all. As far as the election went, it was quite clear, probably about 2 weeks out from the election, that people were actually looking towards the big picture, which was the battle between Tony Abbott and Julia Gillard. So they moved away from local issues. They moved away from candidates. When you actually look at democratically pre-selected candidates, I was actually the only candidate in Throsby who actually went through a contested pre-selection. Mm-hmm. Now, when you're going to have candidates that are parachuted in, it's quite obviously the Labour Party machine is something to behold, to be honest, on which we're all jealous of. We're certainly not jealous of their policies, but when it comes to the people's choice, everybody knew that the election was on a knife edge, and they moved to traditional historical voting patterns.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Mr. Hay, then, in terms of talking about that and Stephen Jones being a puppet, you claimed when I last interviewed you just before the election that he will go with his party regardless of how detrimental a policy may be as payback for his promotion. I must ask, what do you feel may be a policy of detriment to the people of Throsby?
Well, the resources mining tax. Throsby is an area which is particularly reliant on the mining industry, the steel industry, and projects such as the Malden Dumbarton, which the Labour candidate claims to have a definite interest in, will not be able to go ahead.
Okay, so does that mean then that you don't see Stephen Jones putting his words where his mouth is and giving the Malden to Dumbarton rail line the green light, regardless of the results of the feasibility study due next year?
Let's wait and see, shall we? Mm-hmm. This project has been in the pipeline and has been touted by Labour for the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. I would imagine that this project, like many other projects, will be put on hold. And the blame will be put fairly and squarely on the situation in Parliament, i.e. the stalemate.
Okay, Mr.
It will be the excuse extraordinaire.
Mr. Hay, we're going to have to wrap this up very shortly, but one last very quick question. Do you think the fact that you live 60 kilometres north of the border of Throsby and thus out of the electorate boundaries had any impact on the number of votes you received or the way in which the electorate voted?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Hay, that is unfortunately all we have time for. Thank you very much for joining us on Talking Politics at UOW. I am Josh Matthews.
Thank you very much,
Goodbye.
Josh.